couple months, I think.
Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. And welcome back to Sabbath Sunday. This is where Darren and I get together with you on Sundays to discuss all things Black Sabbath. We thought we would take a cue from Black Sabbath. You're expecting episodes from us, but then we don't deliver them, kind of the way Black Sabbath. We expect them to give us box sets and remasters and remixes, and they never materialize. So, we're just kind of imitating our idols a little bit. We've been away for a little bit, but we're back here, and I think we have a fun episode in store for you. What we're going to do today is we're going to rank the 10 most overplayed Black Sabbath songs. All right. Now, what we mean by that is, and we sort of used something to help us here. There's some obvious ones when you think of Black Sabbath songs that you hear on the radio all the time or that they play live all the time. What we did is we went to a website called setlist.fm. That is a database that collects or as many documented live shows as they can. You can go to a particular artist, you can look up their statistics, and you can see a breakdown of the songs that they've played live, the songs that they've played the most live or the least live. You can break it down by year, by tour, by album. So we sort of use that as our guide here, even though we're not ranking live versions, we're just ranking the songs. But we thought this would be a good place to sort of guide us here. So just to give everybody an idea, on setlist.fm, Sabbath's, we picked 10 songs. Sabbath's number one most played song is, as one might guess, Paranoid, with 1,084 plays. Next is Iron Man. Next is War Pigs. Next is Black Sabbath. Then Children of the Grave, NIB. They list guitar solo for the live set, but we're not counting that as a song. Snowblind, Neon Nights, Heaven and Hell. We're not counting drum solo, even though that's been played 446 times live. And last, Fairies Wear Boots. So those are the songs that we're picking from: Paranoid, Iron Man, War Pigs, Black Sabbath, Children of the Grave, NIB, Snowblind, Neon Nights, Heaven and Hell, and Fairies Wear Boots. So we're going to go from our number 10 least favorite. I'll say up front, Darren's going to go first. He can comment on this. I went with how I feel about these songs today. My feelings on these songs right now. Often when we do rankings of songs or rankings of albums, I'll often say I'm sort of picking somewhere in the middle of my life with these albums or these songs. I'm not going by the very first time I got the record. I'm also not going by where I am right at the moment. But for this list, I'm going, this is how I feel about these songs today, 40 some odd years after hearing most of these for the first time. So, okay, Darren, let's start your list. We're going from our least favorite to our favorite. So number 10.
Number 10 for me is Iron Man. That is dead last. I don't care if I ever hear Iron Man again. I shouldn't say that. I'd miss it, but I don't listen to it. When I do put on Paranoid, I will get through it because it's part of the album sequence. But if it's on the radio, comes on the radio, satellite radio or whatever, I will generally switch to another station. I'm reached the full saturation point with Iron Man. So number 10 for me is Iron Man.
All right, so you're going with the same kind of thing as me, how you feel about these songs.
I am. I mean, but these are all classic songs. And, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, to put a list in order the way that we're doing this, it would probably be the same order. These are classic. We're not, obviously in the top 10, there's no deep cuts. I mean, these are all the most popular Black Sabbath songs. And my attitude towards these songs has been pretty consistent probably for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, probably. I'd say probably the same for me. Okay, my number 10, like you, is Iron Man. I am tired of that song. Funny enough, I can distinctly remember when I first got the Paranoid. Somebody had lent me, their older brother had Paranoid, and he lent it to me, and I recorded it off of my friend's older brother's record. And I distinctly remember thinking, oh, this is great. Now I can listen to Paranoid and Iron Man whenever I want, as often as I want, because I used to have to sit and wait for it to come up on the radio. But at that point in my life, I'd probably only heard Iron Man about 10 times, and now, when I've heard it 10,000 times, I'm pretty tired of it. It's when it comes up in the album sequencing, I'm kind of okay with it, but hearing them play it live, I no, I'm tired of it. I won't skip it if I'm listening to the album from beginning to end, but like you, if it comes on the radio, I'll probably skip over it. It's one that I'm just really burnt out on. So number 10 for me is Iron Man.
Okay. So number 9 is Paranoid, the song Paranoid. I do like the song Paranoid. And there's a difference here. When I hear it on the radio, I will generally turn it up. I mean, I like Paranoid. And we did a ranking. I don't remember what the premise was, but I maybe it was ranking the songs on Paranoid, I guess. And I ranked the song Paranoid pretty high. I do like the song. I like it a lot. It's a good rocking song. It's got a good energy. However, in a live situation, I don't like it. I never liked the way that Ozzy did it solo. I certainly don't like it when Dio sang it on Live Evil or any of the bootlegs from in and around the era that he was in Sabbath. And I don't really like it um, when Sabbath did it when Ozzy rejoined. When he would when they were touring for the album, it was okay. I mean, generally it was a little too fast, or there was something about it that just sounded a little off. But later, when Ozzy rejoined, the way he would sing the lines, the verses, he had a different inflection. He had a different accent on some of the words, and it was a fail for me. It didn't have the same kind of feeling that the studio version does. So I really disliked hearing Paranoid live, and I think they probably got it right from about 1970 to 71. After that, it started to get pretty tired. So that's a song that's in a live situation has definitely reached its expiration date. But of course, it's like it's classic Black Sabbath, so they couldn't perform live without playing it.
Yeah.
I would have rather heard something else.
It's probably their
Deep
biggest
Cut
song.
from Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or something from Sabotage or something. But of course, it wouldn't have been as popular. And for obvious reasons, they would always play Paranoid. And pretty much for that reason, because it had been played so often, that falls at number 9 for me is my least favorite overplayed Black Sabbath songs, or however we're going to title this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought that was going to be higher up on your list, but I feel you.
I tried, I tried to put it up higher, but there's just songs that I'd rather listen to. But like I said, I mean, I do like it. When I hear it on the radio, I'm cool with it. If I hear a live version, just no.
Okay, number 9 for me is Fairies Wear Boots, and I kind of feel bad putting this low on the list, but again, it kind of has to do with the songs that came after it. I can't really say why, except that I just like the other songs a little bit better. And I won't say I'm really all the rest of these songs. I don't really consider myself to be burnt out on them. If any of the rest come on the radio here, I will listen to them. Iron Man is the only one that I really feel like I sometimes skip over it when I'm listening to the album. I will turn it off on the radio. Fairies Wear Boots, that's not the case, but it's just that some of the songs ahead of it, I just like them better. So number 9, Fairies Wear Boots.
Okay. Number 8 for me is War Pigs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, War Pigs. Again, if I hear the studio version on the radio, it's a 50-50. It's a toss-up. Sometimes I will change it if I'm not in the mood. Other times I'll turn it up, and if it hits me in the right moment, then I'm good with it. Live, I mean, I've heard it so many times. Every live album, all the bootlegs that I have, and the various singers doing it, I get the point, and it doesn't hold any new thrills for me. So, Paranoid, I'm pretty much spent, or I'm sorry, War Pigs, I'm pretty much spent on. I'm good with War Pigs. If I didn't hear it again in a live context, it'd be all right. And there's a good chance we won't. I mean,
yeah,
we won't. Then I won't be playing live anymore. But even going back to the live albums and things like that, I don't really enjoy hearing it live. And again, within the context of the album Paranoid, I like the production quality. I like the song, as it exists on the studio album, but in a live situation, it's not very exciting for me anymore. So that's right.
Okay, number 8 for me is Paranoid. And for a lot of the same reasons that you said, I believe it's the first Black Sabbath song I ever heard. So if there's one Black Sabbath song I've heard more than any other, it's probably Paranoid. It's their calling card. They always play it live, every era of the band, every singer. Ozzy plays it live all the time. It's the song that when somebody's covering the band, you're always so disappointed because they'll cover Paranoid. And like you, I like the studio version. I like early live versions of it. But it's just, I've heard it so many times. But I love to tell this story. I saw them on, I believe it was the 13 tour. It was when I first moved to Tampa. So yeah, it must have been the 13 tour. And the show ends. They come back out, and of course they start playing Paranoid. And there's a kid in front of me, probably 13 years old, 14 years old. And he just starts going crazy. He's air guitaring. He's just jamming. Everybody's standing up in their seats at this point, and he's totally getting into it. And the kid turns around at me and he looks at me and he goes, "This is my favorite Black Sabbath song. I was hoping they were going to play it." I thought to myself, like, this kid probably just discovered this album 6 months ago or a year ago. And
Yeah,
so for him, again, the
that's cool.
if the
Yeah,
13-year-old me saw Black Sabbath with Ozzy live, I would have been like, man, I can't wait till they play I would have, my head would have exploded when they played Paranoid.
that's really cool. That's cool. I didn't really enjoy the last time I saw him. I was kind of bored with it, actually.
Well,
Just
that's, this is
yeah,
probably, we could make another video topic on this, the whole, and this factors into some of this, the fact that the last so many tours, so many years with Ozzy, the set list just deteriorated. This was always the first 3 albums with one or two other Dirty Women, maybe Snowblind, and the first 3 records. And you just got the same songs over and over.
yeah,
And another thing too is that you mentioned, I forget what context it was that you mentioned it, but all the singers have done this song. And some of them do Paranoid, and you could say the same thing about Iron Man, better than others. But like, for instance, Dio, I don't really like, you mentioned it, hearing Dio sing Paranoid. I don't like hearing Dio sing Iron Man. So that's also another thing too, that I tend to not like certain singers singing these songs. It just kind of doesn't sound
yeah.
right. And so the fact that
Getting
they
stuck.
play it live, like crazy, it's going to be there in the set list. And I get it. It's there. I mean, every band has that song, and at every concert there's somebody there who has never seen the band live before, never heard the band live. And so for them, you have to do Paranoid. But for us fans, if, again, a topic for another video, but if they had mixed up the set lists more, you might be more okay with them coming out for an encore and playing Paranoid and Iron Man. But just the way it is, I've heard these songs too many times. Again, you hear it on the radio. They used to play the video. If you saw a Black Sabbath video on MTV back in the day, it would, chances are it was either Paranoid or Iron Man. So
Yeah,
number 8 for me, Paranoid.
okay. Towards the end, I think I appreciated it less hearing the greatest hits when I saw them when they came back out, even when they had before Bill Ward came back and they had Mike Ward, and I remember I saw him in '96, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was cool. I mean, I would actually I liked hearing War Pigs and Fairies Wear Boots and Paranoid because it had been
Yeah.
so long. So it was great hearing these songs with the original, well, with the Mike Gordon, of course, wasn't the original lineup. But then when Bill came in, I saw him in 2001. Man, I had just a great time. I saw him at an Ozfest, I think, and I saw him on the tour, The Last Supper, I think they were calling it.
Mm.
It was one that the video was that year that they filmed the home video, and I really enjoyed them. I mean, I really enjoyed hearing War Pigs, Paranoid. Fairies Wear Boots, and all the classic songs because it had been so long. But then, as 15 years later,
Yeah.
okay, I get it. Let's dig a little deeper. Let's bring some stuff out from Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And I think they tried to do Under the Sun once or twice,
Yeah.
and it just didn't sound right. But
No, it was terrible.
for
Yeah.
trying, and I wish they had done that more. And there's certain songs, obviously, they wouldn't have been able to get off the stage without doing Paranoid and Iron Man. So I mean, there's no way around that. But some of these other songs that we've talked about or we're going to talk about probably could have been dropped from the set list, but they weren't, and consequently, we got pretty burned out on them. So you know, killed it for a long period of time just with the cycling of the same songs.
Yeah.
So where are we? We're on
Number 7. I believe you're on number 7.
My turn.
Yep.
Yeah. So 7 for me is Black Sabbath.
Mhm.
I mean, again, it's getting into Paranoid and Iron Man territory where we've heard other singers do it. I mean, Dio's version was okay. I liked it better than Paranoid and Iron Man. I like Tony Martin. I liked his version of it. Ian Gillan did a version of it. I mean, all the singers have done a version of the song in the live situation. Ozzy does it best, probably because he owned the song. He was the first one to sing it. I like hearing his voice singing the song more than I like any other singer. But now that we're getting closer to the top of the list, this is a song that falls for me at number 7. I didn't dislike hearing it live. It was cool. It's the namesake of the band, so you can't like Black Sabbath and dislike, the title of the first album and also the namesake. But on the other hand, heard it a lot. So here we are. At number 7 for me is Black Sabbath.
Yeah. Okay, number 7 for me. And again, even though we're talking about the live versions too, and that does affect your opinion on some of these songs because you have heard them, you hear them on the live records and stuff like that. In my mind, I'm also kind of holding up the studio versions as the definitive versions, at least for me. So at number 7, I feel bad putting this here, but Neon Nights. And really now I'm into the territory where I'm not really burnt out on any of these songs. And I mean, maybe to minor degrees. Again, I feel bad putting Neon Nights this low because it is after the song Heaven and Hell, I think Neon Nights is probably the most Dio. When you think of the Dio era of Black Sabbath, you think of the song Heaven and Hell. Maybe you think of the song Mob Rules, but Neon Nights is certainly up there too. It's a real signature. And the band sounds fantastic on it. So it's not, and believe me, I don't turn this off if I hear it on the radio. But I just kind of like the other songs better, and the other songs have some, I think maybe a little bit more memories for me or something. I don't know. I don't know why. I feel bad for putting it here, but it lands at number 7 for me, Neon Nights.
Kind of surprised at that, but okay. Good explanation. I'll buy it. We're at 6, and 6 for me is NIB. So we're right around the middle, and that's kind of where I am with NIB. I love the song, but I've heard it a lot, and so I'm kind of like indifferent to it in a way. I don't dislike it. I'm not thrilled to hear it, but I'm cool with it, and I enjoy it for the most part. But it's not. There's songs that we're going to get into from this point on that I would rather hear. But as it is, NIB falls at number 6 for me.
Okay, number 6 for me is also NIB, and kind of what you said. It edges out Neon. Actually, on my list that I have here, I had Neon Nights and NIB flipped, but I called an audible here as we were going along. And I think what NIB does, the reason why it edges out Neon Nights ever so slightly, first of all, hearing that song when I was younger, the whole lyrics and everything. I like Ozzy's delivery on it, and Iommi's solo too. It's one of my
Mhm.
favorite Iommi solos. That whole dun 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 dun. I just think that that's epic. The whole band sounds great. It's a very compact song. It kind of hits you quick. But it has a lot of interesting little things going on. The breakdown section, your love for me has just, but and just as a kid, like the way these lyrics, it's got this satanic thing in there, but it's done in this uh romantic way, the devil and his lover or whatever. So I
Yeah.
just found that really intriguing as a young kid, and I just always liked these lyrics, and just the whole sound and vibe of the whole thing. And Iommi's solo is probably what knocked it just above Neon Nights for me. So my number 6 is NIB.
Yeah, it's probably and we talked about this before. It's one of the first solos where it really felt like Iommi thought it out. Like
Yeah,
he constructed this solo, and it's very fluid and it's catchy, and you can't hear the song. Like if he were to change the solo, or if he were to improv the solo whenever he played the song, and the solo wasn't right, it would be conspicuously absent. So it's a very integral part of the song. That solo. You're right. The lyrics, like you said, I mean, they are kind of like satanic, I guess, but it's done in a classy way. It's almost kind of
mhm.
gothic. It kind of has a goth, and it really ties in a lot of these songs. When I listen to this album, I always have the cover in my head with the witch standing there, and
Yeah,
at the old mill house and stuff like that. And a lot of the vibe of these songs ties in with that kind of imagery, and NIB is definitely one of them. So, but yeah, even when we're talking about things in this context, it's been listened to a lot. So unfortunately, this is where it gets kind of tough ranking these things from here on
mhm.
out. So yeah, like I think we're both at number 6 for this. Is that what it was?
Yeah, we both had
Yeah.
NIB at number 6. Yeah.
Um, where it kind of falls, unfortunately. 5 for me, Children of the Grave. Um, I still really dig Children of the Grave. I love Master of Reality, and more often than not, it has been. We're talking about how we rank these songs lately. I've been listening to Master of Reality a lot more lately. I really I've always loved the album, but I come back to it more often. I just really enjoy the songs, and more than anything, I love the sound of the album. I love the production. I love the
Yeah.
richness of the bass and the guitar and Bill's drumming and Ozzy's voice. I love every song on Master of Reality, and I love the sequence of the album too. It's a fantastic album, and I don't think maybe I've always, like I said, I've always loved the album, but I think it's more recently that I've really appreciated some of the subtle things about it and really got into it and just really listened to it. And I think in a lot of ways, and this is the topic of our quintessential Black Sabbath albums, and we went in detail about what we thought
Yeah.
were our quintessential Black Sabbath albums, and Master of Reality is mine. So, Children of the Grave, I really still enjoy listening to it. I can listen to it right now, and I'd be into it. Always good. I'm always up for Children of the Grave.
Yeah. All right, number 5 for me, it's the same. Children of the Grave. That main riff, the way it sort of sneaks in on you, it sort of fades in. It's just so iconic. It's so heavy. It's so metal.
Mm.
There's a tone to this whole song. It's the riffs are very dark sounding. The lyrics just sort of apocalyptic. Geezer at his best, singing about the destruction of us destroying the planet. That's a real, specialty area for Geezer. I love Ozzy's melody line in it. That
Mm.
whole middle section with the down, da down, da down,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. And
So,
remember hearing it for the first time, and I remember when I heard it on the radio but they always used to cut out that whole ending thing with the children, children, children,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
because it's on radio, right? So they would always just end the song after the. So when I got the record and I heard that, the whole like
Yeah,
that whole thing,
yeah,
I
it's
was just
scary.
like, wow, this is just so cool. And this is one to talk about when they play things live. This is one of those, like, as soon as Iommi hits that first note, it's like people dun, 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 dun. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know what it is. It's just such a killer riff. And you think about how many bands have
Oh,
that
I know.
that rhythm. Dun, dun, dun,
Oh
dun,
yeah.
dun, 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 dun. That's almost like a heavy metal, signature thing of heavy metal in general. And it's like Black Sabbath. I don't know if they were necessarily the first band, but they were probably the first band to do it in this heavy of a context. And on the studio recording, when the whole band kicks in and Bill Wardslow's like those rototoms or whatever they are, it's just fantastic. So
I think
it
those are timbales. Yeah, that's the riff that I think launched 1,000 bands, or at least
yeah,
1,000
yeah,
songs.
exactly.
It is the if you're gonna like talk about iconics, doom metal, stoner rock,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
riffs, it's Hole in the Sky is one. This is another. Yeah, I mean that's a top two.
Yeah,
So
maybe the verse riff to Lord of this World. Dun, da, da,
yeah,
da,
yeah,
da,
that's a good
dun,
one.
da. That's like a whole
Yep,
stoner,
for sure,
if you
for
right.
sure. Yeah,
That's sort of groovy. If you're gonna do groovy, you're gonna do the
yeah,
Lord of this World verse. If you're gonna do kind of upbeat swingy, you're gonna do Hole in the Sky. And if you're gonna go kind of doom metal, you're gonna do the Children of the Grave riff.
yeah, for sure. I
And
mean,
it's kind of cool because it just starts with, when they do it live, I love that it just starts with Iommi, and just, again, as soon as he hits that, it's like everybody knows what it is. This is one that I like Dio singing. I like pretty much all the singers singing this live. I like Dio's version of this. Ozzy, he did this much after with Randy. I mean, I know, it's on the tribute album and everything. I don't know if he's ever done this with Zach. I'm not as familiar with Ozzy's you know, live stuff. I think Ozzy started falling into just doing, Paranoid and Iron Man and stuff. But it's one that Ozzy, when you think about the songs that he took with him from Black Sabbath, Paranoid, Iron Man, Children of the Grave, those were like the first three that he was doing when Randy was in the band. And
I'd be willing to say he must have. He
yeah,
probably
I'm
has.
guessing
I
too that
can't think of it offhand. I mean, I've seen him with Zach probably about 5 times, maybe.
okay, he's done it with Zach. All right.
But interestingly though, on the No More Tears tour, they opened up with Paranoid. Do you remember that? Did you see that?
Yeah.
And it's also on the that live album, Live and Loud.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. They opened up with Paranoid, kind of like the way they did in 1970, 71.
Okay, I think we're
Uh,
at number 4.
Number four, what, Heaven and Hell falls at number four for me. Um, could have been higher. Definitely wouldn't be lower. Ranking the rest of the remaining songs, it fell at number four for me. Great song. Um, and like my current fondness for Master of Reality, I'm also currently fond of Heaven and Hell, the album, and Mob Rules. Those two are in pretty frequent rotation here. I'm getting ready for the Live Evil box set.
Mhm.
So I've been brushing up on that. Not that I really need to, because all that stuff's always in pretty frequent rotation. But Heaven and Hell, great song. It's iconic as well as anything from the Ozzy era. In fact, from the Dio era, it is that song that represents, I think, probably more than any other song, that era perfectly. It's a beautiful song. It's well constructed. It always sounds great. It's always, I'm always ready to hear Heaven and Hell. It comes on the radio, I'm all in. I'll turn it up. There's never a time that I ever have the desire to change the station or anything like that. Live, I have plenty of bootlegs. I've heard it, and it always sounds great. Dio always delivered this song. Any of the material he recorded with Black Sabbath, he always delivered really well, and this is no exception. They get into that middle section where it would vamp, up into the the ending part where the double time tempo thing. But there's that plateau, or he would have that that improv. There's a
Yeah.
big black shape looking down on me, and
Yeah.
all that. So, while Geezer just kind of kept the bass line going. So it's pretty dramatic. So it had its own vibe in a live situation, which is undeniably great. And also in the studio, yeah, it's a great song. So number 4 for me is Heaven and Hell.
Okay. Number 4 for me is War Pigs. And this is one that certainly could have been lower on my list due to burnout factor. But this is one of those songs, and I'm sure I've probably said this somewhere on the podcasts or here, that it's kind of like, for me, this is the real this is the real. I know most people say Paranoid is Black Sabbath's calling card, but for me, War Pigs is really that song. And it's one of those songs that's an iconic heavy metal song. Like Number of the Beast, or if you hear Highway Star. Yeah, I say this all the time. Like when I'm at a show, when they're playing music over the PA system and you hear War Pigs come on, I still like it. I like that the intro to it is just so heavy. The air raid siren is just so epic. The big thing for me is one of my favorite moments in heavy metal. If I were to say that, what moments and songs that just sort of encapsulate heavy metal for me, it's that part at the end when it does a dun 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 dun, and Naomi goes into the bum 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 dun 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 dun. That is just so epic. It's one of those, you're in a crowd waiting for a band to come on. They're playing that over the PA system. Everybody's singing along. It's one of those I'm proud to be a metalhead moments. It's Ozzy's delivery in it is great. So even though there is some burnout factor to this, I just have so much respect for this song. Its place in heavy metal, its place in the Black Sabbath catalog, that it ranks pretty high up on my list at number 4.
Cool. 3 for me is Neon Nights. Yeah, that's a great song. I don't hear it very often on the radio. Satellite radio will play it. No, bust it out occasionally. When they do, I'm into it. It's a great song. Real good energy. Of course, it's the first song on Heaven and Hell, and basically, if back in the day when you got that album and you're waiting to hear what the new singer sounded like, your first glimpse of that was Neon Nights. So Dio's premiere with Black Sabbath. Great song, great energy. It's Dio at his finest. Lyrics are great. There's a chorus. Iommi's great riff, nice solo. Probably double or even triple track, but it works. It's classic Black Sabbath, and it's a song that I haven't gotten burned out on. I haven't heard it enough, or at least not to the extent that I've heard the songs that are later in the list, like Paranoid, Iron Man, War Pigs, and so on and so forth. So I'm still pretty yet to be burned out on Neon Nights.
And I was pleasantly surprised. I kind of figured that I wasn't sure if any Dio songs were going to make the list, just because I figured, we used setlist.fm as our sort of guide here, and they go by how many times things have been played live. And I figured, well, the Ozzy era it has the longest run as far as the opportunity for a song to be played live, because these songs came out earlier. The Ozzy era songs came out earlier than the others. But to see Neon Nights on the setlist.fm list, it's because it was played like with Tony Martin all the time, and it was played quite a bit. So I was pleasantly surprised to see Neon Nights up there. Felt bad putting it lower on my list, but that's because of songs like What I Have at number 3, which is Snowblind. That intro riff. I was just listening to some live versions of this song the other day, jumping around on YouTube, listening to people do drum covers of it and stuff. I always like the drum part in this. And there's a point in the song where that main riff comes back in, and the way Bill, he like hangs on the chords with the guitar. Bum, 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 daga, daga, I love when it drops down into the verse, the way Bill's on the hi-hat with that dun, 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 and
Yeah.
whole my eyes are blind, but that is just great. The ending of the song when Iommi goes into that solo, and the way the song goes out, it's so epic. I love the lyrics, to play on the lyrics, even though we know now they're referencing cocaine. You don't even have to, just the imagery of the whole thing, you don't even have to think of it as cocaine. It's still just cool imagery. And it's just man, that main riff is just so massive. The middle of all the riffs in the song are just great. It's just a great song. So it lands, absolutely no burnout for me at all on this. Even when they do it with Ozzy, this is one that did pop up in the reunion eras and on. And I always think it sounded great. And yeah, it's just a great song. So it lands at number 3 for me, Snowblind.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with everything you said. That's a great song. But curiously, as you were talking about, to your point about being surprised that Neon Nights is in the top 10 as far as songs that were played live, I agree. I was surprised to see it there too. It's been played 451 times. Now, of course, Paranoid has been played 1,084 times, it looks like. Songs that break 1,000 are Black Sabbath, War Pigs, Iron Man, and Paranoid. From there, it goes down with Children of the Grave and goes in descending order. From that point on, with the stuff in the Dio and whatnot. That's interesting. I was surprised to see that Neon Nights was played 451 times. Anyway, number 2 for me is Fairies Wear Boots. I love the song, always have. Probably my favorite song on Paranoid. I love the progressions, the transitions from parts, and how some of the parts are so unique to one another, yet they fit seamlessly in that song.
Yeah.
And I don't get tired of hearing it, because there's always something to look forward to. It doesn't dwell on one part for too long where there's it's easy to have a burnout factor, right? It never, each part of the song doesn't seem to overstay its welcome. It gets into the next part pretty quickly and in a logical way. So it carries through, and it has a great flow, a great movement. It's almost kind of, for that time, 1970, it's almost kind of proggy in a way, in the way that it shifts different parts and the transitions to different parts. It's a very well written song, and so early in the band's career, where other songs one could argue maybe that they're a little bit clumsy in their structure, they hang too long into a certain part, maybe they're not quite arranged as good as they could be. I think that to counter that argument, you could say that Fairies Wear Boots is pretty much a perfect composition, especially for a band that early in their career. So, and I love it. It's a great song. So, number 2, Fairies Wear Boots.
Yeah, and it almost is a song that, if you wanted to point to the magic of the original 4, you could point to Fairies Wear Boots, because it does have all these sort of tempo and feel changes, something that they did very well back then, this shift from something that's very straight to something that's very swinging, the opening of the thing, dun, 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 all that, and just the way it shifts and moves around, and it's just done in such a organic, way. Just they're so locked in with each other. You can just tell that it's the definition of, musical chemistry is the way they're able to move in and out of these different feels and these different sections. Something that's a real trademark of the original band, something that really the original band is the only band that's been able to do that. We did our Headless Cross podcast recently. By the way, I'll link the podcast down below in the description. And we talked about how by the time we get to Headless Cross, there ain't no swinging on Headless Cross. There's none of that kind of grooving and swinging and bluesy swing feel that they had to a lot of the earlier stuff. That's almost completely gone at that point, if not gone altogether. But Fairies Wear Boots is a good example of them, really doing that. Okay, number 2 for me is going to be Heaven and Hell. This is, I mean, you mentioned it already. It's maybe Dio's most. I know Ronnie always said that Heaven and Hell was his favorite record, and I think that the song Heaven and Hell too was maybe his greatest accomplishment, if you will. Some people might point to Stargazer or Gates of Babylon, a series of epic Ronnie type of songs, the song The Last in Line. But for me, it's Heaven and Hell. It's his vocal delivery in those verses is just so, and it also shows the change from the Ozzy era Black Sabbath to the Ronnie era Black Sabbath. It's still dark, it's still heavy, but there's a little bit more of a majestic, triumphant feel to it that you didn't get with the Ozzy era. The main riff is one of those Teutonic riffs of all time. If you're cataloging the greatest metal riffs ever, this might be one of them. Should be one of them. The way the song just starts on the riff, I always thought was just fantastic. It just hits. Another one of these songs that when you're sitting in a crowd before a band goes on and this comes over the PA system, everybody's sing me a song. You can't help but sing along to this. The way the song goes out is so epic. To say that life's a carousel, just Ronnie, some of his best lyrics. Ronnie liked to do that kind of contrast thing, rainbow in the dark, contrast, heaven and hell type of thing, and singing about the way the world is full of different contrasts, the rich, the poor, the haves and the have-nots, and this is just, I think, one of his finest lyrics. It's an amazing song. The way it ends with those guitars and everything, it's so epic. Again, Stargazer and stuff like that is amazing, but this is just an amazing song, and it's one of the greatest heavy metal songs of all time. So number 2 for me is Heaven and Hell.
Number 1 for me is Snowblind. That one, of what we had to choose from, the top 10, Snowblind definitely jumped out for me. Some of it was the element of surprise. I'm surprised to see it as one of the top 10 most frequently played Black Sabbath songs. But such as it is, it's a great one. Volume 4 is a fantastic album. Probably you rarely hear songs. I rarely hear songs anyway. From Volume 4, Changes will sometimes make its way onto satellite radio, and I can't really hang with Changes. But you don't hear, and it's curious that this list is the most popular Black Sabbath songs. I think it's from Setlist FM, so these are songs that they played live. I'm a little curious about Snowblind. I mean, it's been played live 400, 600, no, 454 times. That's surprising. But everything you said about it are my sentiments as well. The way that Bill plays, the way that the band is so well integrated with one another. By this time, 1972, they are really just totally in tune with one another, and they're just an incredible tight band, and this song definitely represents that. I love the mellotron at the end, the last
Yeah.
chorus. It's really cool. And interestingly, in a live situation, I really, really, I mean, I love the studio version, but I love the version from the Never Say Die Live. I
Yeah.
love the way that Ozzy has the inflection that he adds, and he just in between the verses, the way that he sings it. I love the way he sings it. It's probably one of the it's a highlight on Never Say Die Live. I love hearing him sing Snowblind on Never Say Die Live, that live video from 1978 at the Hammersmith Odeon. And likewise, whenever I hear live versions of it, I listen to whether or not he's doing that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When he
Yeah.
finishes the verse, and he goes into the next line. And sometimes he does it, and sometimes he doesn't. But I always look forward to hearing that from that particular Hammersmith 1978. So the win for me in a studio situation, and it's definitely a win in the live situation. So that's those two versions representing this particular song is what made it number one for me.
Yeah, I was surprised to see this on the list also, just because, it didn't come in till the fourth Black Sabbath album, so they missed a couple years of having a chance to play it live. And I don't think any other singer has sung this song, have they?
I would say the only singer that may have done it would be Tony Martin, but
Yeah, but I don't think I've ever heard.
yeah, I don't.
So it's one of those songs, and it's one of the ones that as soon as Ozzy came back with the reunion, they pretty much always played it too. And once the album came out, they pretty much always played it live. So that's probably how it sort of squeaked in on the set list, FM top 10 list. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see it there. But my number one, and I'm going more with the studio version of this, thinking of the studio version of this song, but the song Black Sabbath. Uh, I honestly don't really like anybody else singing this song but Ozzy. Maybe I'll give Tony Martin early on when he sang it. I thought he did a good job. Didn't like Gillan singing it, didn't like Dio singing it. But for me, oh man, the rain, the bell, that main riff, the dynamics in the song, Ozzy's voice on that studio version. It's just a song that I can still listen to and just put headphones on. And the atmosphere of that song when everything gets quiet and Bill's tribal, like distant tribal drumming there in the back, is just so cool. And the way that song builds, I really like the Paris 70, that video version of it where Iommi plays that thing, but which he did a lot later on too, where
Yeah,
he
the
play a
intro.
little intro to it. I think that is just super cool, adds a real cool atmosphere to it. But just the way that whole song builds, it's just so dramatic. It wasn't the first Black Sabbath album that I had, but I had that early on, and it made a huge impression on me. It's just a fantastic album opener. So uh, it lands. Never get tired of the song Black Sabbath. So that lands at number one for me.
Cool. Yeah, this Black Sabbath always reminds me of Hammer horror.
Yeah,
Um, it has that British horror, that early
yeah,
70s, late 60s, early 70s vibe. Music just pairs so well with those old movies from the Hammer Studios of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Um, and you're right. I mean, it almost it does have a cinematic quality with the rain and the thunderclap, and you're right. It does have a really thick atmosphere, and Bill's the way that he approaches that part during the verse. And in a lot of these songs, as we're going through, I mean, you talk about Black Sabbath as the originators of this style of music and how they were able to form a template of how to
mhm,
react, especially from a drummer's perspective, how to react to different things. Iommi was just had a unique style. The riffs were unique. There's not too many of the riffs in Black Sabbath that you would hear anywhere else. I mean, there's heavy
yeah,
bands, but the way that Tony would build a riff and the way that the songs were structured, and the riff sets of like one riff to another. And you have to think of Bill Ward, and he doesn't get as much credit as he deserves, because he's the guy that was able to figure out what to do. How do I play to that riff? I mean, if you never
Yeah.
heard it before, I mean, you can like, there's other riffs that are a little bit more stock, for lack of a better word, where, okay, you keep a simple beat and it works. It's, rock and roll, or you keep a swing beat. But some of the things, like when you have to think of Bill when he's presented with some of this stuff, the imagination that he had
Yeah.
to be able to play drums to some of this stuff. And
Yeah.
with this particular song, it's like, what do you do during that verse part?
Yeah.
And
Imagine if he had just played like boom, chick,
yeah,
bah, chick,
no, but
bah, chick, boom, boom, chick. It would have completely
yeah,
changed the feel of that song. That sort
right.
of tribal playing off on the toms, that so sets the mood to
Mhm.
that. If you just had like some kind of boring straight eighth notes on the hi-hat playing just a steady beat through that, it would totally change the mood of the whole thing. And it just
Yeah,
totally it wouldn't work at all. It's that the drums are a huge part of
yeah,
the atmosphere of that song. The
yeah,
way he accents them too is like do 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 do. There's dynamics to it. It's something that's
yeah.
like completely lost with like modern
Oh yeah,
metal, where everything is plastered and in your face and just loud and boot to the head, man, all the time. But this is like the way the song gets quiet, there's dynamics in it. That riff is super crushing. And ladies and gentlemen, not only is it not tuned down at this point, he's not even playing his lowest string. It's a G chord, which is a little higher up on the neck, yet it still sounds ominous and crushing. And it's because of the dynamics. It's because of the atmosphere. It doesn't have anything to do with being tuned down and playing fast or super loud or anything. The heaviness of this song is the spaces inside it.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's between the notes. It's that atmosphere that's between the notes. Um, and again, I have to keep coming back to how creative and what an imagination Bill Ward had, um, when he was building these songs with the rest of the band. And you always hear about, well, the Ozzy era, and then it makes sense to put the singer in front of the different eras. In the '70s era, Ozzy, and you put the singer in front, because really the sound, more than any other member, is shaped and it's characterized by the vocals. But Bill Ward, yeah, just a really great drummer. And even in the whole, if you're looking at an overview of rock music and heavy rock in general, I don't think Bill really gets the credit that he deserves.
And
Um,
also, Iommi, lately I've been honing in a little bit more and listening to Tony's soloing. And when people usually talk about Tony Iommi, he's the king of the riff. He's the godfather of the riff. And he is. He is the riff meister. He's this endless supply of just iconic. Look at his list we're talking about here. Some of the most iconic riffs in heavy metal are on this. A lot of them are on this list.
mhm.
But sometimes I think his soloing gets a little overlooked. And when you put it in the context of 1970, like the solo in this song, it's very catchy, it's very thematic, you can sing along with it if you want to. It's very kind of thought out. Dun, 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 when he's sort of climbing down, and then he does bends going up the neck, down, 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 down. It really builds to the ending of that song. And I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. Like at this time, I mean, Jimmy Page could have done a solo, maybe done a solo like that. Blackmore probably could have. I don't think Mick Box would have played a solo as memorable as that. I don't think Eric Clapton would have played a solo as memorable as that. I mean, Iommi's right up there with those guys. And sometimes I think that, he just, because he's such a great riff writer, that's kind of what everybody thinks of first when they think of Tony Iommi. But he's a great soloist too, and he writes very memorable. And for this time, a lot of guys were just jamming. When they soloed, they were just sort of playing blues licks. This is a structured, worked out, thematic type solo that really builds and serves the song very well. You couldn't play this song without playing this solo. You couldn't just have some crazy, jamming, random jamming thing. It wouldn't work. You got to have, it's just like War Pigs. You got to have that solo. Snowblind the same way. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these where that's Iron Man. You could say the same thing. War Pigs, a lot NIB, these very sort of thematic type guitar solos. So that's a big factor for me too. And I've come to appreciate that even more with Tony. What a great soloist he is.
I think he did it sometimes, but he didn't do it enough. When he did do it, it's noticeable because it's countered by the times when he had some sloppy double track solos. He did that a lot. And he did it a lot on this album. But there are the two songs that was more structured, that were more structured and more thematic, as you said, definitely NIB and Black Sabbath. But in between, there's a lot of songs that are just, he seems like he's just flying by the seat of his pants.
Yeah.
And I think that as strong as his soloing is on Black Sabbath and NIB, it's overshadowed by all the times when there isn't quite as much of a structured solo part. There's a space in the song where it's set up, this is where the solo goes, and it just sounds to me like a lot of times he just goes for it. It sounds like it's in the moment, and if he didn't like it, then he'd say, well, let me do it again, and then he'd do another solo, and rather than pick that one over the other one, let's put them both together. You know what? I'm gonna do another one. Let's put that one in there too. There's 3 solos. So that kind of overshadows the times when he's very tasteful and on point. Then when you talk about, you went through a list of great guitar players, iconic guitar players: Jimmy Page, Ritchie Blackmore, Eric Clapton. I'm not much of a Clapton fan, but I would also add David Gilmour to that list. David Gilmour's solos, and more than not, are very often solos that are integral parts of the songs, and solos that you can sing, and if they were missing, they would be very conspicuous. So I think David Gilmour is the king of well thought, well placed, well played solos in rock music. And when Iommi does these solos in these 2 songs, and also in Dirty Women, not part of this context, but there's other times when you could say that Tony plays a really well constructed solo. It gets into that area of a David Gilmour. But you're right. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that really are into Eric Clapton, but I mean, there's a few times where I can say, well, that's an iconic solo. That's a great solo. That's a solo that is essential to the song. But I don't think that he's necessarily the master of that particular thing. But I would qualify David Gilmour as being that way, and so he's what I measure when I think of guitar solos. I often think of, well, does it fall into the category that David Gilmour's solos fall in? Is it memorable? Does it serve the song? Is it something you can sing? Is it musical? Too often there's a lot of solos that Iommi does that aren't just guitar noise. But when he does put a good solo in a song, and it's very noticeable. So maybe you have to have the other stuff to make the contrast, and when he does knock it out of the park, it's very noticeable. It's like, wow, whoa, what's he doing? It's so different from some of the other songs. But,
all right, well, there you go. That's Darren and I, our ranking of the 10 most played Black Sabbath songs. We're curious what you think of our ranking. How about you guys? Where are you with burnout factor on some of these songs? Because, that is a serious thing here with a lot of these songs. There is some burnout involved. So let us know in the comments down below what you guys think. We had a pretty good, haven't seen you in a few weeks, so we thought we'd give you a good epic episode here. So let us know what you think of our list. Let us know what your lists are, and make sure you check out the podcast link in the description. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.